Karen plugged her car charger into my outdoor outlet, so I synced it to a treadmill. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from. You ever have one of those neighbors who just can't help themselves? Like they truly mean well, but somehow their help ends up making things 10 times worse? Yeah, that's Karen. Karen moved into the neighborhood about a year ago. Friendly, chatty, and always popping over with something. Cookies, garden clippings, flyers about local events. At first it was kind of sweet. Harmless even. She'd offer to water your plants if you were out of town, or bring in your trash cans before you even had the chance to roll them out to the curb. But the thing about Karen was, she never really asked. She just did. Like she had this invisible checklist in her head labeled good neighbor points, and every day she was determined to rack up as many as possible. Now, I'm all for kindness. I'm not some grump who hates small talk or neighborly gestures. But there's a line between being helpful and just plain nosy. And that line? Karen crossed it one random Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, same as usual. Headphones on, coffee half drunk, trying to get through emails when I got a little notification from the app that's connected to my outdoor smart plugs. Nothing serious, just a ping saying Outdoor Outlet 1, power usage detected. That was odd. I hadn't plugged anything in out there. No Christmas lights, no electric tools, nothing. I figured maybe the app was glitching. Wouldn't be the first time. But a few minutes later it pinged again. Higher wattage this time. Curious, I paused my work, walked over to the kitchen window and peeked out. And there she was, Karen, standing in my driveway like she owned the place, casually unspooling a thick black cord from her hybrid SUV and plugging it directly into my outdoor outlet. No knock, no text, no, hey, do you mind if, just full Karen mode. I watched her for a second in disbelief. She wasn't being sneaky. Nope, she was humming, like she'd done this a million times. Like she thought she was doing me, or the planet, a favor. And the wildest part, she looked pleased with herself, like she was proud of this little eco-friendly hack she'd come up with. I stepped outside, trying to play it cool. Hey, Karen, I called. She turned, smiling like a kid caught red-handed with a cookie. Oh, hey, I saw your outlet and thought, how convenient. My car was running low, and I didn't want to drive all the way back home just to plug it in. Hope that's okay. Hope that's okay, I forced a chuckle. Yeah, just surprised me a bit. That outlet's on my grid, though, so... Yeah. Oh, I know, she said cheerfully. But it's just a quick charge. Barely a couple of hours. I read somewhere it's less than running a clothes dryer. Then she gave a thumbs up like we were in on some kind of clean energy mission together. I nodded slowly, trying not to let my eye twitch. Right, of course. Back inside, I stood in my kitchen just stunned. Who does that? Who plugs in their car at someone else's house like it's no big deal? That was when the idea hit me. Not a mean one. I'm not a jerk. But a clever one. A way to set a boundary without ever raising my voice. Something that would make a point, and maybe get a little chuckle in the process. I stared at the smart plug app on my phone for a moment, and then I grinned. Treadmill time. Ever since I was a kid, I've had this habit of taking things apart just to see how they work. Radios, microwaves, the family blender. If it had wires, buttons, or the potential to explode, I was interested. My parents called it a phase, I called it research. Now I'm older, with a garage full of half-finished projects, miles of tangled extension cords, and a reputation in the neighborhood as that guy who probably has a drone flying around somewhere. Not far off, honestly. I don't invent for money or fame. I invent because sometimes the world is too boring the way it is. And if you can twist it into something a little more interesting, why not? So the day Karen plugged her car into my outdoor outlet, let's just say she had no idea what she was stepping into. It was a Thursday morning and I was elbow deep in a homemade coffee roaster prototype. The idea was to roast the beans with solar reflected heat and then cool them using a repurposed CPU fan. Totally impractical, totally fun. Then I got a notification from my energy monitor. Surge in outdoor circuit. Again? I wiped my hands, headed outside, and sure enough, there was Karen, smiling like always, phone in one hand, electric vehicle humming gently in my driveway, plugged in to my house. "Oh, hey," she chirped. "Hope you don't mind. I just needed a top-up before yoga class. Your outlet's so conveniently placed." I blinked. Now I could have gotten annoyed, told her to unplug, set a firm boundary. But instead, the gears started turning. And when the gears start turning, things usually get weird. "Sure," I said slowly. "Help yourself." I walked back inside, opened up my home automation dashboard, and stared at that little blip on the power grid. It wasn't much power, but it was enough. Enough to trigger something. Enough to run something. I stared across the room at the old treadmill I'd pulled out of someone's bulk trash pile a few weeks back. The belt still worked. The motor? Spotty but not dead. I had an idea I'd never tested, something I joked about with a friend once. Could I sink her car charging to a treadmill? Not in a serious way. I mean, obviously her car wouldn't need the treadmill. But maybe the treadmill could react to the power draw. Every time the car took in a certain number of watts, the treadmill could kick on. Just for fun. Just to see if it could work. It became my little challenge for the afternoon. A couple of relays, some custom scripting, a smart plug rerouted through a Raspberry Pi, and boom, I had a system. The moment her car charger reached a certain threshold, the treadmill sprang to life. Not fast, nothing dangerous, but enough to cause motion, enough to raise eyebrows. So when Karen came back from yoga, sipping her green smoothie and waving as she unplugged her car, I invited her in. "Want to see something cool?" I asked. She followed me inside, a little cautious but intrigued. I pointed to the treadmill. "Watch this." I flipped the switch, simulated a car plug-in load using a dummy battery draw, and the treadmill started moving, slowly at first, then a little faster. Karen gasped. "Is that my car charger doing that?" "Sort of," I grinned. "More like inspired by your car charger." She laughed. "That's insane, but also kind of awesome." Exactly. By the time she left, I had a dozen more ideas bouncing around in my head. A solar-powered popcorn machine, a bike that blends smoothies while you ride. Who knows? But it all started with Karen. Plugging in. Uninvited, sure. But unknowingly powering one of the oddest, most fun inventions I'd made all year. Karen and I have always had the kind of neighborly friendship that thrives on a little mischief. Not the mean kind. More like the harmless, gotcha kind. You know, the type of dynamic where you never leave your garden gnome unattended for too long, or else it might show up on your porch dressed in a Halloween costume. In June. Last summer, I replaced her wind chimes with a Bluetooth speaker that played elevator music every time the wind blew. In return, she planted a fake squirrel in my mailbox, the kind that screams when you open the lid. Classic Karen. Classic us. So when I noticed the cord snaking across my lawn one breezy Saturday afternoon, thick, black, unmistakably EV grade, I didn't even have to look up to know who was responsible. There it was, plugged straight into my outdoor outlet, and there was her white SUV, humming quietly in the driveway like it belonged there. No knock, no message. Just plugged in like we were roommates splitting the power bill. I stepped outside with a soda in hand and gave a little wave as she jogged past with her dog. She called out, "Hope you don't mind." Just a quick top-up and kept on running. I nodded, took a sip, and smiled to myself. "Oh, Karen, you just walked right into this one." I wasn't mad, not even a little. In fact, I appreciated the setup. She basically handed me the perfect opening for a prank. And since we already had a history, well, this one was going to be good. Back inside, I grabbed my toolkit and went straight for the garage. A few months back, I'd picked up an old treadmill off Facebook Marketplace for next to nothing. The belt was a little jerky, but it still ran. I'd originally planned to turn it into a motorized standing desk setup. That project died somewhere between "I'll start it this weekend" and "maybe next month." But now it had a new purpose. I pulled up my smart home app, rerouted the outdoor outlet through one of my smart relays, and hooked it up to a timer-triggered plug. It didn't take long. Just enough wiring to make sure that every time her charger drew power past a certain threshold, the treadmill would power on. Full speed for 10 seconds. Enough to make a point. Nothing dangerous, but definitely enough to cause a moment. Then I waited. The next morning she was back, this time in yoga pants and sipping something green out of a mason jar. She didn't even glance over as she plugged in again, just tossed a "thanks" over her shoulder and disappeared down the street. I counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. From inside, I heard the familiar mechanical whir of the treadmill firing up, followed by a thud, and then a screeching noise that could only be described as confused panic. I raced to the window just in time to see Karen stumbling back from the treadmill, wide-eyed and trying to figure out what just happened. She looked up at the camera mounted on the corner of my garage, the one she knew was there, and pointed at it like she was scolding me through the lens. Then she burst out laughing. I stepped outside, doing my best innocent face. "Everything all right out here?" She narrowed her eyes but couldn't stop grinning. "You did not just turn my car charger into a booby trap." "Technically," I said, "I turned my outlet into a full-body wake-up call." "You're welcome." She shook her head, still laughing, and muttered something about revenge. I told her I'd be expecting a glitter bomb in my mailbox by Friday. The great thing about Karen is she never stays mad, and with us it's always been this light-hearted game of one-upmanship. Little jabs, big laughs, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting around the block. Technology's a funny thing. It's supposed to make life easier, cleaner, smarter, faster, and most of the time it does. Smart fridges that order milk when you're running low, lights that turn off when you clap, vacuums that map your house, and still somehow manage to get stuck under the couch. But the truth is, for every piece of tech we rely on, there's a dozen things happening in the background we barely understand. Wires, codes, connections, settings we haven't touched since the day we set them up. Which brings me to my outdoor outlet. Now on the surface, it looks like a regular plug, tucked into the corner of my house near the driveway. Nothing flashy, but what Karen didn't know was that it wasn't just an outlet. It was a node in a much bigger system I'd rigged together over the last couple of years. Solar-fed, smart synced, usage tracked. The whole thing feeds into a server in my basement that balances energy between my backup battery banks, a few custom garden lights, and an overly complicated fish tank pump system. It's a bit of a Frankenstein setup. I like it that way. So when Karen decided to borrow a little juice for her EV, which she did completely unannounced, she triggered a chain reaction she definitely wasn't expecting. It started with a beep, then a click. Then the garden lights flickered on in broad daylight, blinking like they were caught in a disco loop. My phone buzzed with a notification from the aquarium app. "Warning, pH regulation system offline," and then the treadmill turned on. Yes, the treadmill. The one I'd connected to a power balancing circuit so it could automatically test load tolerance. It wasn't meant to run. It was just there to take on dummy loads during battery calibration. But Karen's car charger? That wasn't a dummy load. That was real, heavy, and completely unaccounted for. I looked outside and saw her leaning casually against her SUV, scrolling on her phone, totally unaware that the simple act of plugging in had just knocked out half of my home automation setup. I stepped out onto the porch. "Hey, Karen," I called. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, just topping off the battery. Hope that's okay." "Yeah," I said slowly, glancing at the garden light still blinking behind her. "Seems to be lighting up the whole system." "Oh, is that bad?" I gave her a shrug. "Not bad, just unexpected." I went back inside, pulled up my system dashboard, and sure enough, everything was out of sync. The water pump in the fish tank was pulsing like a heartbeat monitor. The thermostat in the garage had flipped itself into tropical mode, and the treadmill still running. It gave me an idea. I figured if her charger was going to be the wild card, I might as well turn it into something more visible. Enter the treadmill fix. I rewired the system, nothing fancy, and routed the power draw from the outlet directly through the treadmill's relay. That way, anytime the charger activated, the treadmill would spring to life for a few seconds. Not only would it act as a sort of visual warning system, but let's be honest, it was going to be hilarious. The next day, like clockwork, Karen returned. She plugged in, looked around, and then, whir, the treadmill roared to life, loud, fast, right there in the garage with the door half open. Karen jumped. I stepped outside trying to keep a straight face. She pointed toward the noise. Is that thing connected to my car? Technically, I said. Your car woke it up. She blinked, laughed, and looked almost proud. Well, that's new. I nodded. Welcome to the future. Behind her, the garden lights blinked in approval. Living in a neighborhood is like signing up for a long-term, low-stakes social experiment. Everyone's got their own space, their own routines, but you're all loosely stitched together by fences, sidewalks, and that unspoken agreement to generally not drive each other crazy. The key ingredient that keeps it all from descending into chaos? Boundaries. Not just physical ones like fences or property lines, but the invisible kind. The knock before you enter, don't let your dog poop on my lawn kind. The kind that say, hey, I like you, but let's not pretend we share a utility bill. Karen, bless her heart, is still learning that part. Don't get me wrong, Karen's nice, friendly even. She's the kind of person who always waves, always compliments your lawn even when it's clearly struggling, and seems genuinely interested in how your day's going. But she's also the type who thinks being neighborly means open access. No biggie if she waters your flowers while you're out of town. Totally fine if she leaves a package on your porch so her dog doesn't chew it up. Little things, right? The line got crossed, actually crossed, the day I found her car plugged into my outdoor outlet like it was a public charging station. It was a Saturday. I walked out back with my morning coffee, glanced down the side of the house, and had to do a double take. There was a thick charging cable wrapped around my garden hose leading to Karen's SUV. Plugged in, on my wall. No note, no text, no, hey, do you mind? I stood there for a minute, trying to figure out if I was overreacting. Maybe she thought it was just a quick favor. Maybe she assumed I wouldn't care. But the more I stared at that cord, the more I felt like something had been taken. Not just electricity, but the simple courtesy of being asked. When I walked over to unplug it, she came out her front door like it was the most casual thing in the world. Oh, hey, she called. I hope that's okay. I just needed a little top up. Didn't think it'd be a big deal. I gave a polite smile, but inside something tightened. It was a big deal. Not because of the electricity. Honestly, it probably cost me less than $1. But because of what it said, that my space, my stuff, my boundaries didn't really matter. So I came up with a plan. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to leave a passive-aggressive note. I was going to send a message. My way. The treadmill had been sitting in my garage for months, ever since I decided running in place was one of life's crueler inventions. But now it had a new purpose. I rigged it so the moment someone plugged into the outdoor outlet, the treadmill would power up. Not gently, loudly, dramatically. Like it had something to say. It didn't take long. The next time Karen wandered over, I watched from the kitchen as she uncoiled her charging cable, plugged it into her car, and then into my wall. Just as casually as someone flipping on a porch light. And then it started. The treadmill roared to life, vibrating the garage floor, the belt whipping at full speed like it was chasing someone. Karen froze. She stared at the wall, then at the cord, then at the garage, where the noise echoed like a gym from the depths of hell. I stepped outside just as she backed away from the outlet, eyebrows raised high. Is that connected to the plug? She asked, half laughing, half alarmed. Yeah, I said, sipping my coffee. It's my personal energy feedback system. She stared at me for a second, then burst out laughing. Okay, I get it. Message received. I nodded. Glad we're on the same page. She unplugged, still smiling, and promised to ask next time. And just like that, the boundary was back in place. Not through confrontation, but through creativity. I've always been a bit obsessed with sustainability, not in the Instagram aesthetic, mason jar everything kind of way, but more in the tinkering, how can I make this weird thing run on sunlight? Kind of way. My garage looks like a solar panel graveyard, half-charged battery banks, a compost tea brewing system I built out of old aquarium parts. I once powered my coffee machine using a converted exercise bike. Only once because my legs gave out halfway through the brew. Point is, if there's a way to reduce my footprint while also feeding my inner mad scientist, I'm in. So when I saw Karen's car charger plugged into my outdoor outlet, uninvited mind you, my first reaction wasn't anger, it was curiosity. She must have plugged in while I was in the backyard checking on the rainwater system. When I walked around front and saw the cord snaking from her car to my wall, I paused. There it was, a fully electric vehicle, quietly humming, soaking up my power like a thirsty plant. I should have been annoyed, but instead I stood there thinking, what if? I'd been toying with the idea of tracking real-time load response from EV charging to test sustainable offsets, basically figuring out how much strain charging puts on my local grid and how I could balance that with physical or kinetic output. In simpler terms, could I build something that responds to the charge and outputs effort? The treadmill, sitting half forgotten in the corner of the garage, sparked an idea. What if I used Karen's charger, her unintentional borrow, to finally test my green energy feedback loop? Within an hour, I had it set up. The outlet was rerouted through my inverter, then into a smart plug relay. Every time the charger hit a certain wattage draw, the system would activate the treadmill. Not to feed energy back, I wasn't that ambitious yet, but to physically mirror the energy usage. The faster her car charged, the faster the treadmill ran. Energy in, motion out. I called it kinetic mirroring. Totally unofficial, probably not scientific, but deeply satisfying. The next morning, Karen returned. She plugged in without saying a word, completely unaware she was about to become part of my eco-experiment. Inside the garage, the treadmill fired up with a steady whir, calibrated to the draw from her EV. I stood there watching it go, belt spinning, power levels rising, my dashboard lighting up with beautiful, messy data. A few minutes later, Karen walked over, sipping something green and foamy. "What's going on in there?" she asked, peering into the garage. "Your car," I said, "is jogging." She laughed. "I don't even run. Why is my car doing cardio?" I walked her through the setup, trying to keep it simple. How the treadmill matched the load, how I was measuring output reactions and power flux, how it wasn't really useful in the traditional sense, but it painted a picture. She looked at the spinning belt, then back at her car. "So basically, I'm charging my vehicle and working out indirectly? That's one way to look at it." She nodded, then surprised me. "Can I see the data?" I blinked. "Wait, really? Yeah, I always hear about how charging is better for the planet, but I've never actually seen what that means. This is kind of cool." So we pulled up the numbers, and I walked her through them. Usage spikes, energy offsets, even an estimate of how many footsteps the treadmill had simulated in 30 minutes. It wasn't much, but it was something, and it all started because she plugged in without asking. Our neighborhood's always been the kind of place where people share things. Tools, ladders, recipes, garage space, even the occasional random appliance. We've got a group chat called Maple Lane Makers, and it's half buy nothing board, half DIY support group. It started with small stuff. Someone needed a stud finder? Check the green toolbox on Dave's porch. Looking for tomato cages? Linda probably has extras. Before long, we were trading power washers like Pokemon cards and hosting backyard build days with borrowed circular saws and too much lemonade. So when Karen plugged her EV charger into my outdoor outlet, I almost wasn't surprised. It wasn't her first time borrowing power. I'd seen her charge her phone on Greg's porch during a blackout and once caught her running an extension cord from Becky's house for her bubble machine at a birthday party. Thing is, around here, borrowing without asking isn't always seen as rude. It's kind of common, but there's a thin line between casual sharing and assuming something's free game, and Karen was tap dancing on it. She caught me outside while I was pulling weeds and waved, all cheery as usual. "Just topping off real quick," she said, nodding to the thick black charging cable snaking from her car to the side of my house. I smiled, but inside I was already replaying the treadmill incident from last week. She hadn't seen that setup. The treadmill that whirred to life every time the charger pulled current, practically vibrating the garage floor. But I had video. And more importantly, I had an idea. Later that week, I brought it up at the monthly neighborhood check-in. We hold them in Becky's backyard. Folding chairs, a whiteboard. Someone always brings brownies. When it was my turn, I stood up and said, "So, I think it's time we talk about outlets." People laughed, but they listened. I told the story, showed the video of the treadmill suddenly activating, and played back Karen's confused reaction as the machine powered up from her car charger. She laughed too, thankfully, but it sparked a bigger conversation. "We share everything," I said. "Which is great, but it might be time to talk about how we share, especially when it comes to utilities." That's when someone suggested a workshop. Not a dry lecture, but a hands-on kind of thing. A way to walk through how shared systems work. Solar panels, smart plugs, garden irrigation setups, timers, even basic electric load stuff, and how not to accidentally crash someone's fish tank by charging your Prius. So the next weekend, we turned my garage into a little demo lab. I brought out the treadmill setup again, this time with a better visualizer that showed energy draw in real time. We used it as a case study. I labeled wires, broke down circuits, and even let Karen charge again so folks could watch how fast the treadmill ramped up. People loved it. Greg brought his solar inverter. Linda explained her rain barrel setup with a pump timer. Someone even made a sign that read, "Ask before you plug," and hung it on the table like it was a motto. Karen stood next to me, nodding along, occasionally elbowing me and whispering, "Okay, I deserve that treadmill prank." By the end of it, we weren't just talking about power usage. We were talking about respect, about treating each other's setups, tools, and homes with a little more mindfulness. Not less sharing, just better sharing. Technology's great until it isn't. 1 minute it's making your life easier, syncing your lights to sunset and ordering dog food before you even remember you're out. The next minute, your fridge is flashing defrost error because someone turned on a hairdryer 2 rooms away. That's the thing no one tells you about smart homes. They're only smart until a human does something dumb. Enter Karen. Karen, for all her enthusiasm, does not speak fluent tech. She once asked me if my solar panels could beam power to her house if she left her blinds open. So when she casually plugged her car into my outdoor outlet without asking, she had no idea she just set off a chain reaction worthy of a sci-fi comedy. It happened on a quiet Monday morning. I was inside sipping coffee and watching my indoor plants try to decide if they were going to live or die, when I heard the unmistakable click whir of my automation system cycling. Then another click, then a pop. My lights flickered. My air purifier rebooted. And then I got the dreaded push notification on my phone. Unexpected load. Spike detected. Outdoor circuit 3. Outdoor circuit 3. That was the one tied into my prototype system. A delicate, somewhat over-engineered combination of solar overflow routing, smart outlets, backup battery stabilization, and, for reasons I still don't fully understand, a fish tank heater on a timer. And now, courtesy of Karen's EV charger, it was going haywire. The solar inverter started compensating for the sudden draw, thinking the batteries were being drained too quickly. That triggered my emergency load shed protocol, which promptly turned off the basement dehumidifier and activated the garage treadmill. Not on purpose, just because I had forgotten to reset one of the fallback switches after a firmware update. So now I had a car charging on my lawn, a treadmill spinning wildly in the garage, the fish tank heater stuck on boil, and Alexa saying things like, "I'm not sure what you mean by override protocol panic mode." I walked outside, blinking in the sunlight, and there was Karen, humming to herself, earbuds in, completely unaware that she'd just sent my entire electrical system into panic. "Morning," she called, waving. "Hope it's okay, I'm plugging in again. Just a little boost before yoga." I smiled tightly. "No worries. My house just thought it was being robbed, but it's fine." "Oh no," she said, pulling out one earbud. "Did I break something?" "No," I said. "You inspired something." Back inside, I pulled the plug on the chaos, rewired the routing. I decided once and for all to make use of the treadmill as a safety valve. If someone plugged into outdoor circuit 3, the system wouldn't panic anymore. It would power the treadmill. A simple visual cue that said, "Hey, you're pulling power here." Plus, it was funny. And after the boiling fish tank incident, I needed a laugh. Next time Karen plugged in, she jumped as the treadmill roared to life. She turned to me, wide-eyed. "Is that connected to my car?" "In a roundabout way," I said. "Let's call it an early warning system." She laughed. "Well, it works. Scared me and probably burned a few calories." I nodded. "Just be glad it didn't trigger the sprinkler system." I've always believed that when life hands you a problem, it's a chance to show off your creative side. No need for confrontation or drama. Just a little out-of-the-box thinking and maybe a dash of humor. That's how I approach most things, from fixing a leaky faucet to dealing with more delicate neighborly issues. Take Karen, for example. I've known her for years, and while she's generally friendly and well-meaning, she has a habit of overstepping boundaries in ways that, at first, seem harmless. Like the time she borrowed my ladder without asking and then forgot it on her porch for a week. Or when she decided to borrow my garden hose to water her plants. While I was home, mind you, but she didn't think it was worth a knock at the door. So when I walked outside one morning to find her car plugged into my outdoor outlet, with no warning and no permission, it wasn't the first time she'd used something of mine without asking. It wasn't even the first time she'd plugged her car into an outlet in the neighborhood. But instead of getting upset, I thought to myself, this is an opportunity to solve this in a way she'll never forget. Instead of confronting her directly, which would have been awkward and probably led to an uncomfortable chat about boundaries, I decided to do what I do best, think creatively. What if I could make the situation so bizarre and entertaining that she'd never think of plugging into my outlet again, but in a way that she'd actually enjoy? I'd give her something to remember. So I went inside, grabbed a couple of cables, and started rerouting the outlet's connection. I connected the outdoor outlet to a smart plug and ran that to my treadmill. The same treadmill that had once been a forgotten relic in the corner of the garage. Now it would serve a new purpose. The perfect, unexpected consequence for anyone who dared to tap into my power. When Karen returned, I was ready. She cheerfully walked up to plug in her car, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I waited. With a subtle smile, I hit the switch. Instantly, the treadmill roared to life, its belt beginning to spin at full speed, vibrating the garage like a washing machine on a high spin cycle. The look on her face as she turned around and saw the treadmill moving was priceless. She froze, blinking in confusion as she processed the sight of a treadmill, suddenly powered by her car's charging system. What's going on?" she asked, pointing at the treadmill. I walked over, casually sipping my coffee. "Well, it's your car, doing its part to fuel this treadmill. Since you're taking my power, I thought it would be nice if you could give something back." She blinked again, then let out a surprised laugh. "Are you telling me that treadmill is running because I plugged in?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," I said. "Every time someone plugs into this outlet, the treadmill fires up. It's my new energy feedback system. I call it kinetic response technology." She burst into laughter, clearly both confused and impressed. "That's genius, and a little scary. I almost had a heart attack when I saw it start moving." I smiled. "It's harmless, but it's also a reminder that sharing is great, but asking first is better." She nodded. "Okay, I get it. No more charging on your outlet without permission, and I might need a treadmill workout after this." As she unplugged, she kept shaking her head in amusement. "Honestly, I think I've learned more from this than any conversation about boundaries." I leaned against the garage door, feeling a bit smug. Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected places. Our neighborhood has always prided itself on being health conscious. I'm not talking about the occasional jog or a weekend hike. No, we're the kind of place where morning yoga in the park is an unspoken tradition, and every driveway seems to have a pair of dumbbells or a stationary bike tucked in the corner. The scent of protein shakes lingers in the air almost as much as the fresh morning coffee. I'm all about it. I've got my routine down. Every day I hit the garage for some weightlifting, then take a brisk jog on the treadmill to cool down. It's not about being the fittest person in the neighborhood. It's about feeling good, staying active, and staying consistent. But one afternoon, Karen unknowingly threw a wrench in the works. I was in the middle of a sprint session, drenched in sweat, when I heard the unmistakable click of the outdoor outlet being used. I slowed down, pulled off my earbuds, and peeked outside. There she was, Karen, standing by the side of my house, happily plugging her electric car into my outdoor outlet. I could have walked out, asked her to stop, maybe even gotten into a conversation about boundaries. But something in me just didn't want to break my stride. Literally. I wanted to finish my run, so I went back to the treadmill and pushed myself even harder. That was my first mistake. Within minutes, my treadmill abruptly stopped. No more whirring, no more rhythmic movement. The lights flickered and I saw my phone buzz with a notification. Power loss detected on outdoor circuit 3. I cursed under my breath and hit the pause button. What now? I walked outside where Karen was still blissfully unaware of the chaos happening inside my garage. She smiled and waved, all cheery and unbothered. Just topping off before my meeting. Hope it's okay. Normally I would have said something, but instead a thought popped into my head. Something about this whole situation seemed like an opportunity for a creative solution. I smiled and walked back into the garage. The treadmill was already back on, but this time I had an idea. Within minutes, I had the setup ready. I rerouted the outlet and connected it to the treadmill so that anytime someone plugged in their car, it would fire up the machine. It wasn't going to drain energy or be a power hog. It was just a fun little reminder that charging comes with consequences. I stepped outside and called out to Karen, who was still fiddling with her car's charger. Hey, Karen, you might want to check out the treadmill. She looked at me confused. What's going on now? Go ahead, plug in again, I said, grinning. I made a little modification. She plugged in her car once more, and sure enough, the treadmill whirred to life. Faster this time, as if in sync with her car's power draw. The sound of the machine humming loudly caught the attention of the neighbors. One by one, people came outside, intrigued by the unexpected noise. Next thing I knew, we had an impromptu workout session starting in my driveway. At first, it was just a few neighbors who stopped by to watch. But then someone joked, well, if the treadmill's going, why not use it? And suddenly the vibe shifted. My neighbor Greg, always the fitness enthusiast, hopped on the machine, pushing it up to a sprint speed. Before long, Karen had stepped in too, laughing and jumping on the treadmill for a round of intervals. Other neighbors joined in, each taking their turn on the treadmill, trying to keep up with the charging car workout. We set up an unofficial circuit, treadmill sprints, kettlebell swings, planks. It became a spontaneous group workout, the kind of thing no one ever planned for, but everyone seemed to enjoy. As we all laughed and shared water bottles, Karen turned to me and said, okay, this is not how I expected my car charging to go today, but I think I might be addicted to this treadmill now. I laughed. You never know what a little unintended workout can lead to. That afternoon, our neighborhood's fitness culture was stronger than ever. We all bonded over the chaos, and Karen, well, she became a regular on the treadmill circuit from that day on. And as for me, I'm pretty sure I got more cardio that day than I ever planned on. But sometimes it's those unexpected moments that make the best memories.